July 29, 2022. It's before dawn in Guatemala City, and armed tactical police are sweeping through a private residence. The scale of this military-grade operation suggests the state is closing in on a violent cartel kingpin. Their actual target was José Rubén Zamora, a 65-year-old internationally recognized investigative journalist. Within hours, the government's official narrative was flooding the airwaves. They accused Zamora of money laundering, blackmail, and financial crimes, aiming to strip away his credibility as a reporter and paint him to the public as a common criminal. In reality, Zamora founded El Periódico. For decades, it stood as the last truly independent newspaper in Guatemala, willing to expose systemic corruption at the highest levels of government. Even on the day of his arrest, his own staff defied the state and published the details of his capture. Why would a supposedly democratic government deploy heavily armed police to silence a man whose only weapon was a printing press? Zamora spent decades documenting an invisible architecture of power that controlled the entire country. His arrest was a desperate act of self-preservation by a state that had been entirely captured by the criminals it was supposed to police. The Pact of the Corrupt operates as a decentralized protection racket born from the aftermath of the country's 36-year civil war. There is no headquarters or formal list of rules, yet it dictates the country's political economy. Looking at this network map, you can see how the invisible market operates. Politicians need illegal cash to fund their campaigns. Wealthy business elites provide that money in exchange for massive state contracts. Military officials protect the smuggling routes to avoid prosecution for historical war crimes. And international cartels provide the capital and force to keep the whole machine running. A co-opted justice system secures this entire network. When judges and prosecutors provide legal immunity to the stakeholders, the market for corruption remains stable and profitable. Zamora understood this structure intimately. He called his work war journalism in times of peace. For over 25 years, his newsroom methodically tracked bank transfers, offshore accounts, and secret meetings to map exactly how this illicit system functioned. Even though El Periódico routinely published hard evidence of these crimes right on the front page, the corrupt elite rarely faced consequences. The captured justice system simply refused to prosecute its own bosses. Then, in 2006, the Pact of the Corrupt faced a massive institutional threat that it simply could not control. The United Nations backed the creation of an independent investigative body called the CICIG, mandated to dismantle the criminal networks operating inside the Guatemalan state. Suddenly, Zamora's journalism had an institutional partner. Instead of being ignored, the findings were picked up by international prosecutors. The articles were translated into actionable, devastating legal indictments. By 2015, these joint investigations triggered an event known as the Guatemalan Spring. A sitting president, Otto Pérez Molina, and his vice president were forced to resign and sent to jail based on massive customs corruption. Ordinary citizens who watched their tax dollars vanish for decades flooded the streets. This public mobilization showed a population finally demanding a functioning, accountable state. The elites realized they were losing absolute control of their country, and they orchestrated a massive counteroffensive to protect themselves. They moved strategically. They expelled the UN Commission from the country and systematically purged honest judges from the bench. They installed fierce loyalists, like Attorney General Maria Consuelo Porras, at the head of the prosecutor's office. The state evolved its methods of repression. Instead of relying on the violent death squads of the 1980s, they deployed lawfare, weaponizing the justice system itself to legally harass, bankrupt, and imprison critics. The Pact learned a very crucial lesson. Firing bullets only creates martyrs, but filing bogus legal charges creates criminals. They could neutralize their enemies and protect their wealth while maintaining the outward illusion of a functioning democracy. By 2020, under the presidency of Alejandro Giammattei, the executive branch and the courts were fully aligned once again. With the state completely consolidated, They moved to eliminate their final institutional threat, El Periódico. The state systematically drained the newspaper of its resources. They threatened advertisers, harassed the reporting staff into exile, and drowned it in fabricated lawsuits. Which brings us back to the early morning raid on Zamora's home. His physical imprisonment was the final blow. Without its founder and starved of capital, the printing presses of El Periódico finally slowed to a dark, permanent halt. The trial that followed relied on a neuro-legal technicality regarding a single bank check, a strategy used to bypass any mention of Zamora's decades of investigative work. To finish the rebranding of a journalist into a villain, the state forced him to appear in court in a heavy tactical bulletproof vest under high security guard. It was a visual performance designed to signal to the public that Zamora was a threat to national security, not a prisoner of conscience. Guatemala's justice system executes the specific mandate designed by its architects. It functions to protect those within the network while selectively applying the law to silence external threats. Zamora's prison cell offers a grim warning that extends far beyond Central America. Modern authoritarians do not need to violently overthrow a democracy. They simply learn to wear a suit, wield a gavel, and disguise their revenge as the law.